Welcome to Trinity Central. We exist to make God central to our lives and our world. You are listening to a recording of one of our Sunday messages. For more information, please go to trinitycentral.org.
So we're just delighted that you're with us this morning. We're so glad to have you. And this is going to be the first of the 3 sessions of our membership course. And we're running it over the next 3 Sundays and videoing it so that we can use it in the months to come. Now, I wonder whether you've ever been gripped by something that you longed for, something that you hoped to be part of. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Cool Runnings is a classic adaptation, classic film. Yeah, there we go. People recognize it. It's one of our favorite favorite movies as a family. And it's the adaptation of the amazing story of the Jamaican bobsled team. An amazing story of men from a tropical island who set their sights on something so improbable that it was actually amusing, and they regularly got laughed at by both their own countrymen and the world at large. They were the ultimate underdogs, which is what makes the story so great. This Jamaican team dreamed of becoming Olympians. And so they came to the Calgary Winter Olympics in 1988. They borrowed a spare bobsled from another team, and they competed in the Olympics. And on their final run, they crashed. But by that point, the world had warmed to these 4 intrepid men, and their story is famously celebrated in the Disney film. And we all love stories like this, stories where people set their hearts and their sights on a dream and they refuse to give up. People who become so gripped with something that they refuse to allow anything to stop them, anything to get in their way. Well, Jesus Christ had a dream. He dreamed of a new community on the earth, a community made up of broken people made whole, sick people made well, captive people set free, and sinful people forgiven and restored. He dreamed of a community that would be so identified with him that it would be referred to as his body on this earth. They would so love him that his presence would be among them, sometimes even in visible ways. They would so embody him that his love for the world would flow through them to the poor, to the broken, to the hurting in every culture, every nation, and every people group. They would be so transformed by his love that they would be a people of radical unselfishness, passionate worship, and unrestrained love. And Jesus dreamed that this people would speak his words, touch humanity with his hands, and bring transformation to life after life in every generation after his death. In the midst of this incredible world, he dreamed of a new community of worshipers, not worshipers of creation or created things, but worshipers of Jesus, worshipers of God. And his dream was so powerful that it took him to a cross. A sportsman might talk about sacrificing for their dream, but Jesus paid the ultimate sacrifice. We might speak of paying a high price to gain our dream, but he paid the ultimate price to gain you and me. And Jesus had a dream. He lived for that dream. He died for that dream. And he has multiplied that dream into our hearts. The dream of an advancing kingdom, of men and women and children set free and transformed, of a church made up of people from every tribe, every nation, and every people group. Bill Hybels, who leads a large church in Chicago, tells the story about how he got caught up in this dream that Jesus had when he was a student. He writes this in his book, Courageous Leadership. "As I staked out my usual claim to a back row seat and assumed a comfortable slouch, legs extended, arms folded, I had no idea that a spiritual ambush awaited me. Toward the end of the lecture, just when I thought it was time to pack it up and leave, the professor, Dr. Gilbert Bilezikian, decided he wasn't quite finished for that day. Closing his notes, he stepped out from behind the lectern. Then he bared his soul to a room full of unsuspecting 20-year-olds. Students, he said, there was once a community of believers who were so totally devoted to God that their life together was charged with the Spirit's power. In that band of Christ followers, believers loved each other with a radical kind of love. They took off their masks and shared their lives with each other. They laughed and cried and prayed and sang and served together in authentic Christian fellowship. Those who had more shared freely with those who had less until socio-economic barriers melted away. People related together in ways that bridged gender and racial chasms and celebrated cultural differences. Acts 2 tells us that this community of believers, this church, offered unbelievers a vision of life that was so beautiful it took their breath away. It was so bold, so creative, so dynamic that they couldn't resist it. Verse 47 tells us that the Lord added daily to their number those who were being saved. Dr. Bilezikian's unscripted words were as much a lament as they were a dream, and a sad longing for the restoration of that first century church. I had never imagined a more compelling vision. In fact, that day, I didn't just see that vision, I was seized by it. Suddenly there were tears in my eyes and a responsive chord rising up in my soul. Where, I wondered, had that beauty gone? Why was that power not evident in the contemporary church? Would the Christian community ever see that potential realized again? Since that day, he writes, I have been held hostage to that powerful picture of the Acts 2 dream painted in that college classroom. In the weeks and months after that first lecture, I was haunted by questions. What if a true community of God could be established in the 20th century? What if what happened in Jerusalem could happen in Chicago? Such a movement of God would transform this world and usher people into the next. I was a goner, utterly captured by a single vision of the potential beauty of the local church. In 1975, that vision led me and a handful of colleagues to start Willow Creek Community Church. Now, almost 30 years later, that vision still rivets my attention, sparks my passion, and calls forth the best effort I can give. Luke, one of the Bible writers, tells us the story of that earliest church in Jerusalem, which was formed just weeks after Jesus' death. This is the passage that Bill Hybels refers to, that he was so gripped by. We start reading in Acts 2, verse 42. And they devoted themselves, the people of this church, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came on every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the needs to all, as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Just as Jesus had arrested the hearts and commanded the devotion of those early believers, he wants to do the same with us here today. We're caught up in something of eternal significance. Here today, we have the opportunity of getting caught up in this dream. Not any dream, but Jesus Christ's own dream. Over these past years, this same dream has gripped my heart, my wife's heart, and the heart of many in this room. We breathe, eat, drink, and live this dream every day to make God central in our lives and in the lives and in our world around us. And that's why we're Trinity Central. That's where our name came from. We are all about making God central in our lives and our world. The Father's love, the Son's mission, the Spirit's power. That's what we're about. Trinity Central. Now, to give you a little bit of the story leading up to here, I'd like to invite my wife to come and tell some of the background to how we got to this point, and then I'll take over from her after that. You might want to give her a round of applause.
So about 17 years ago, in 1999, we had some friends over for dinner. And at the time, we'd recently moved to the UK from South Africa. We were serving in a church just south of Cambridge. And after dinner, Joel turned to Reese and said, "So, Reese, when are you and Sarah going church planting?" And Reese replied, No, Joel, I'm not that kind of guy. I really don't feel like that's what I'm going to be doing in my life. Well, 2 years later, at a leaders' conference where Steve Nicholson was the guest speaker, he leads the USA Vineyard church planting movement, and he pointed at Reese and asked him to stand up, picked him out of the crowd, and he said to Reese, well, first of all, he read Reese's mail and said things to Reese that nobody else in the room knew of. And then he started to prophesy about Reese being involved in church planting and church planting in various cities across the world. And once again, Reese came home and said to me, you know, he's quite impressive. And I know he's got a good track record, but boy, has he got it wrong with me. In 2004, Reese and I were driving down to London with Eden in the back. She was about 1.5, going to be part of a church plant in central London. And I turned to Reese and I said, hey, babe, we're church planting. Maybe Steve Nicholson was right after all. And we were part of that church for about 7 years. And during that time, we began to read the Bible differently. There was a dawning realization that the whole New Testament story was about church planting, that everything that happened after the time of Jesus involved new communities of people who met Jesus and formed together into vibrant communities and church families. 6 years later, we felt like God was stirring us again to church plant. And we began to become so convinced that that was the case that on the 30th of January 2011, we stood in front of the church at Christchurch in London and shared the fact that we felt that God was calling us to church plant into Vancouver. And at that stage, we had no money, no team, no visas. And all we had was a sense of God saying, I'm calling you. Gratefully, God has been faithful to back up that call with everything that we needed. We dreamed of lives changed by meeting Jesus. We dreamed that those lives would be gathered into a community that looked like the book of Acts, that was full of faith, devotion to God, devotion to one another, impacting a city with a message of Jesus' love and the power of God. We dreamed of a church that was not just a club, but a transformational community living together on a mission for Jesus, with Jesus at the center of it all, worshipped and honored. We even dreamed of others being sent to do it with us and to do it again, to plant new churches, city after city. James said it very well in his email earlier this week. The members of the church honor each other, care for each other, suffer together, rejoice together, and witness to Jesus' death and resurrection together. This is the sort of God-centered, radically unselfish and countercultural community that will display the love of God and the good news of Jesus Christ to Vancouver.
John Lennon, one of the Beatles, said a rather interesting thing one day. He said, "A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality." So we arrived in Vancouver in September 2011. We began prayer meetings in our home in November 2011. And over the course of the following months, wonderful friends who'd committed to being part of this dream began to join us. From the UK, from Eastern Canada, from South Africa, Ben and Rebecca Aston, Kat Mann, Suzanne Tucker, Sam and Kath Wade, Nathan Watkins, James and Liesl Vanderwood, Sam and Grace Coggan, Joseph Tinlin, Andy and Sue Watkins, Stephen Chris Wiper, Mark Pescott. All of these moved across the world to come and serve alongside us in planting this church. Later, others arrived, the Earls, the Ives, the Oldhams, the Jones, the Duggans, and I hope I haven't missed anyone off that list. This church plant could not have been established without each one of those people, without all of you, all of those who put their energy into this right at the start. We have been running alphas, seeing friends saved and baptized, forming life groups, praying our hearts out, moving venues. This is the Trinity Central story so far. And friends, the best is yet to come. The team has grown, and so is the dream. We press forward, and as we press forward, what are the greatest challenges that we face in realizing this dream? What are the things that we need to overcome? Well, I think there are two key challenges that our culture presents us with. The first is individualism. It's all about my faith, my personal relationship with Jesus. I study on my own. I attend conferences that are good for me. My spiritual maximization is my goal. I don't really play well in a team. That kind of attitude our culture is steeped in it. The second challenge is externalism, maybe a form of narcissism. I pay attention to what's on the outside rather than what's on the inside. That means I tend towards shallowness. I enjoy community. I feel a sense of belonging. But if I'm honest, my walk with Jesus is shallow. I talk about walking with Jesus, but I don't actually pray. I don't have rhythms of spiritual life. I don't live a deep walk with God. And I'm not really focused on his mission. I like the fun, cool aspects of church. But I find obedience to Jesus really challenging and actually quite uncomfortable. In other words, I'm not really becoming a disciple. Those, I think, are the two key challenges that our culture presents us with as believers, as followers of Jesus. And friends, I'd like to suggest to you that this is one of the key reasons why membership is actually so important. Membership is about three things. Number one, a transforming walk, a life-transforming walk with Jesus, which works its way out in our own lives in delighting in God, coming to him day by day, enjoying him, finding our relationship with him, the thing that feeds us day after day, engaging with him in such a way that we find our life is changing. We find that we begin to be disciples where our walk with Jesus is growing. We're not static. Our obedience is filled with joy. Secondly, a vibrant community, which provides a context for this discipleship. and in which we work out our rhythms of prayer and worship and growth and mission. It all happens together. It's individual, but it's in the context of community. And thirdly, a mission that we're on together, where we become conduits for the gospel and the power of the Spirit into our community, into our city, and into the nation that God has put us in. The underlying idea of membership in Trinity is this: the integration of your growth in Jesus with life as a community on a mission together. And from a leadership perspective, in that sense, we care about two things. We care about your soul and your role. Your soul would be rhythms of worship and prayer, a Jesus-centered life, rest, growth in obedience. Well, what is God teaching you and leading you into? Encouragement, that which strengthens us and says, lifts our head when times are difficult, as it happens. Every one of us goes through challenges. Encouragement is one of those key things that helps us through those challenges. And relationships, growing to greater health in friendships, in singleness, in marriage, and in family life. And then your role. And this is not about a job description, but this is a description of your participation in a family. It's about belonging, being, receiving. It's about caring for others, helping others belong, helping others grow, helping others encounter Jesus. It's about exercising your spiritual gifts and your practical gifts, serving in the church. It's about giving of your resources, your finances, and your time. And it's about engaging in the mission that we're on together. Soul and role. There's this inward and there's this outward. There's this this is Jesus becoming central in my life and then in my world, in the world around me. You cannot grow as a disciple of Jesus outside of Jesus' people. You see, God's whole design was always to shape us and develop us in the context of community. God's plan for mission is community. If you think back on the great sweep of Scripture, Abraham was the father of a people, nation. Moses led a people out of slavery in Egypt. Joshua led the people into the promised land, the rest of God. David led a people to glorify God and bring God's name to the nations. God is the father of this new people. Jesus led this people out of slavery in sin through dying on a cross. Jesus led this people into the eternal promise, the rest of God. And Jesus is leading a people to glorify God among the nations by catching them up in his mission. Jesus wants you to be part of his band, part of his team, his community. Objection. Let's talk about two objections to membership. Objection number one. When I came to Christ, I became part of the global church. Why should I join a local church? The Bible never mentions membership. Well, as Eric Raymond says, right after saying church membership is biblical, I will concede that the Bible does not tell us to have a formalized membership nor implement a church covenant. However, the concept of membership is everywhere. Like Mark Dever says, it is everywhere implied. For example, Paul instructs Titus to appoint elders in every city, to lead, feed, and protect those among them. In Philippians 1 verse 1, he writes to the elders and deacons among the saints in Philippi. In 1 Peter 5, there's a charge to the elders to shepherd the flock of God that the Lord has given them charge of. These are just examples of local communities that were identifiable and organized. Objection number two. Why institute something formal? Didn't Jesus attack formalized obligations and traditions throughout his ministry? Didn't he teach us that it is all about the heart? And the answer is, of course, absolutely yes. Jesus is interested in our hearts above all things. He calls us into relationship, not into formality. And when he requires obedience in his disciples, in us, it is out of our hearts that he requires it. You may have heard about the toddler whose parent told him to sit down and eat his dinner. In defiance, he said, "I will not." His father said to him, "If you do not sit down and eat your dinner, then I will send you to the naughty step for some time out." The toddler thought about it for a few moments, and then he sat down. But before his father could hand him his plate of food, he announced to the house, "I'm sitting down on the outside, but I'm standing up on the inside." I'm sure we've all experienced this same thing at times. We can all identify with that toddler, can't we? We're doing something because we have to, rather than because we want to. Jesus always engaged the heart. He was less concerned about people's outward appearance than he was about what was going on in their hearts. Outward obedience without heart obedience was simply a lie to Jesus, a deceitfulness of the heart. He challenged it again and again and again with the Pharisees and the scribes, who obeyed the outward traditions, but found ways around the laws that would make life challenging for them. Membership, friends, is a heart thing. Marriage, likewise, is a heart thing. There is an institution of marriage, a covenant that is made publicly before friends and family, but it is simply an outward expression of an inner reality, of a heart reality. Marriage is meaningless without love and commitment. Membership in a local church is likewise meaningless without love and commitment. And we give outward expression to that reality for the purpose of clarifying our commitment and our expectations to one another. You know, when I stood on my wedding day and covenanted with my wife, I clarified what she could expect from me, that I would put her above every other human being on the planet, that I would share everything with her, my possessions, my heart, my thoughts, my dreams, my emotions, that I would keep myself only for her, and that these things would remain true until the day that I die or the day that she does. I clarified my expectations. Now she knows what she can expect from me, and I know what I can expect from her. And that clarity brings security, joy, and freedom into our relationship with one another. In the same way, membership clarifies our commitment to walk out God's purposes together as a community, as a church family. It creates security and joy and freedom in our church family. Membership is actually a wonderful privilege. And just as I have the wonderful privilege of being married to this amazing woman, so I have the joy and privilege of being joined with Jesus and with a family of Jesus followers with whom I belong, with whom I serve, with whom I grow, and with whom I reach out. And so we invite you to join us in membership, to partner with us. What is the process for that? Well, as you leave today, we'd love for you to grab one of these booklets, and we've put out what we believe about membership, what it involves in here. We'd love you to grab that and to read it. There's an accompanying document which we'll have up on the website with all of our doctrinal beliefs, and you might want to have a look at that as well. We'd like you to listen to these 3 talks over the next 3 weeks, and then in the process to have coffee with one of our elders and to chat through what questions do you have? What does it mean to be on this journey, partnering together? Then finally, we'll make membership declarations together in front of the church on a Sunday to come. Many of us will know of Eric Liddell, the Scotsman made famous by the film Chariots of Fire. And he spoke these words at the end of his race. He said, "You came to see a race today, to see someone win. It happened to be me. But I want you to do more than just watch a race. I want you to take part in it. I want to compare faith to running a race. It's hard. It requires concentration of will, energy of soul. You experience elation when the winner breaks the tape, especially if you've got a bet on it. But how long does that last? You go home. Maybe your dinner's burnt. Maybe you haven't got a job. So who am I to say, believe, have faith in the face of life's realities? I would like to give you something more permanent, but I can only point the way. I have no formula for winning this race. Everyone runs in her own way or his own way. And where does the power come from to see this race to its end? From within. Jesus said, "Behold, the kingdom of God is within you. If with all your heart you seek me, you shall ever surely find me." If you commit yourself to the love of Christ, then that is how you run a straight race. The Apostle Paul tells us that we all have a race to run. God never intended us to run our races alone, but to run together for the glory of God. Jesus has put his kingdom in our hearts, his power in our lives, and us in this city. T.E. Lawrence said, "All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake up in the day to find it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible." We want to invite you to join us in the dream of seeing this city impacted, churches planted, the poor cared for, and eternity in people's hearts. We want to invite you into membership as part of a church family. As Moses said to his father-in-law, "Come with us, we will do you good." Let us, as a family, as a church, dream together. Let us dream together. Let us consider that which Christ has for us as he catches us up in that incredible thing he started 2,000 years ago to see his kingdom advance until there's representation of it in every tribe, nation, tongue, language. Let's dream of what God will do in our city, beyond our city, and plant after plant, and trust God that he will take even us and use us for his glorious purposes. Jesus loves us. Jesus calls us. Will you respond to him and to one another? Why don't we stand together?